The alien admiral laughed. Not a quiet chuckle, not a polite diplomatic smile. A full, echoing laugh that rolled across the command chamber of the Coalition flagship as hundreds of officers stared at the tactical display. Because floating on the edge of the system was humanity's fleet. And it looked pathetic. Thousands of Coalition warships filled the holographic map. Sleek destroyers, plasma cruisers, antimatter carriers, and shielded dreadnoughts that represented the most advanced military technology the galaxy had ever seen. And facing them, 47 human frigates. Small, boxy, old, primitive metal hulls with exposed weapon rails running the length of their spines. Railguns, weapons so ancient most civilizations had abandoned them before even achieving faster-than-light travel. The admiral leaned forward in his command throne, his 4 golden eyes scanning the tactical overlay. No plasma emitters, he said calmly. An officer confirmed it. No antimatter cannons detected. Another pause. No gravitic weapon systems. The room went silent. Then the admiral leaned back and laughed again. They came to stop the Coalition with metal cannons. A younger officer hesitated. Sir, our records say humans favor kinetic warfare. Yes, the admiral replied with amusement. Stone-throwing weapons. More laughter rippled through the command crew. Across the bridge, an analyst enlarged the human formation. Each ship was labeled with simple registry numbers. No intimidating dreadnought names. No advanced energy signatures. Just cold iron hulls and long rail tracks designed to accelerate metal slugs. Primitive. Embarrassingly primitive. The Coalition fleet commander turned to his communications officer. Open a channel. Moments later, the signal connected. A human face appeared on the projection screen. A woman, mid-30s, calm expression, dark uniform with minimal insignia. Behind her, a human bridge crew worked quietly. No panic, no fear, which the admiral found amusing. You are facing the assembled fleet of the Galactic Coalition, the alien commander announced proudly. You are outnumbered 200 to 1. The human captain nodded slowly. We're aware. You have outdated technology. Another calm nod. Also aware. You cannot possibly win. The woman folded her hands behind her back. Probably. The admiral blinked. That was not the reaction he expected. No threats, he asked. No heroic speeches? The human captain tilted her head slightly. Do you want one? A few Coalition officers snickered. No, the admiral replied. I want to understand why you came. The woman glanced briefly toward her tactical officer before answering. To stop you. With railguns. Her lips curved slightly. Yes. The admiral gestured at the tactical display where thousands of Coalition ships surrounded the tiny human formation. You brought 47 obsolete frigates. That's correct. You do realize this fleet has conquered 3 galactic sectors. Yes. You believe your metal cannons will stop us. The human captain finally smiled. Admiral, she leaned slightly closer to the camera. Your mistake is thinking they're obsolete. The transmission ended. For a moment, the Coalition bridge was quiet. Then laughter exploded across the command chamber. The admiral waved dismissively. Humans and their dramatic flair. He turned to the weapons officer. Prepare a warning volley. Across the battlefield, Coalition cruisers began charging their plasma cannons. Massive spheres of burning energy formed along their hulls. Target the outer human ships, the admiral ordered. Cripple them. Leave survivors. The weapons officer nodded. Plasma batteries charged. Fire. Across the darkness of space, a storm of blue plasma erupted toward the human formation. On the human flagship, the bridge lights dimmed slightly as power rerouted to defensive systems. The captain stood calmly at the center of the bridge. Range. Enemy plasma will impact in 23 seconds. Helm. Formation stable. Railgun charge. Capacitors at 100%. The tactical officer glanced at her. Permission to return fire? The captain shook her head. Not yet. The crew exchanged brief looks. Plasma filled the tactical screen like an incoming meteor storm. One officer quietly muttered, "This is the part where most species panic." The captain smirked. "We're not most species." The plasma storm reached them. Then something strange happened. The human ships moved. Not randomly, perfectly. Each frigate shifted position in a slow, controlled drift that caused the plasma barrage to pass harmlessly through empty space. Not shields, not interception, just precise maneuvering. Dozens of plasma blasts missed by meters. The coalition bridge fell silent. Did they just? An officer started. The admiral leaned forward. Impossible. But on the tactical display, every human ship remained intact. Not a single hit. Then a new alert appeared. Human weapon systems active. Across 47 frigates, massive electromagnetic rails began glowing. Capacitors discharged. Magnetic coils roared to life. On the human flagship, the tactical officer spoke calmly. "Railguns ready." The captain gave a single order. "Fire." Space exploded with streaks of white light. 47 kinetic projectiles accelerated to impossible speeds. Each one a dense tungsten rod traveling faster than most missiles. The coalition sensors barely registered them. No energy signatures. No plasma trails. Just sudden spikes of mass moving at devastating velocity. On the alien flagship, alarm screamed. Unknown projectiles detected. Speed. Relativistic. The admiral's eyes widened. Raise shields. But the shields were designed for energy. Plasma. Lasers. Antimatter. Not this. The first railgun slug struck a coalition destroyer. There was no explosion. No fireball. The projectile simply punched through the ship like it was paper, entering one side, exiting the other. At relativistic speed, the destroyer broke apart a second later as atmosphere, reactors, and structural supports failed instantly. Across the battlefield, 6 more coalition ships were hit. Each impact looked small, almost unimpressive, until the ships started disintegrating seconds later. Hull fractures, chain reactions, reactor failures. The tactical display lit up with emergency alerts. On the coalition flagship, the bridge crew stared in stunned silence. 7 warships gone. In one volley, the admiral whispered one word. "How?" On the human flagship, the captain watched the battle calmly. Status: 7 confirmed kills. Enemy shields adapting? Negative. She nodded. Good. Then she gave the next order. Begin Phase 2. Her tactical officer smiled slightly. Charging railguns. Outside the viewports, 47 obsolete human frigates rotated in perfect unison, preparing another volley. And across the coalition armada, thousands of ships suddenly realized something terrifying. The primitive fleet they mocked was about to tear them apart. For 3 long seconds after the first volley, the coalition command bridge remained silent. 7 ships, 7 modern warships, from the most powerful military alliance in the galaxy, erased by weapons the coalition considered museum relics. The admiral slowly stood from his command throne, staring at the tactical display as fragments of the destroyed destroyers drifted through space. "Damage analysis," he ordered. The sensor officer swallowed. Projectile penetration, complete structural failure across all 7 vessels. Shield integrity? The officer hesitated. Shields did not engage effectively. The admiral turned. Explain. The analyst enlarged the data. These projectiles contain almost no energy signature. Our shields are calibrated to disperse plasma, antimatter, and directed energy weapons. He paused. But these are mass-based impacts. The admiral's eyes narrowed. Stone throwing. Yes, Admiral. Another officer leaned forward. At those speeds, the kinetic force is catastrophic. The admiral watched the battlefield carefully. 47 human frigates floated calmly in formation, their hull-mounted rails glowing faintly from residual heat. Primitive ships, primitive weapons, and yet 7 coalition warships were now expanding clouds of debris. The admiral folded his arms. They fired one volley. Yes, meaning they must recharge. The weapons officer nodded. Electromagnetic railguns require capacitor recharge cycles. The Admiral's confidence returned slightly, so they cannot sustain rapid fire. Correct. How long? The analyst checked the data. Estimated 30 seconds minimum. The Admiral turned toward the tactical officer. Very well. His voice hardened. Advance the destroyer line. Hundreds of coalition ships began moving forward. Sleek vessels, powered by gravitic drives, surged toward the small human formation. On the alien flagship, the Admiral spoke with renewed confidence. They may have surprised us once. He pointed at the human fleet. But 47 ships cannot stop 3,000. Across the battlefield, human sensors tracked every movement. On the bridge of the human flagship, quiet voices filled the room. Enemy destroyer line advancing. Range closing rapidly. Estimated firing distance in 40 seconds. The tactical officer glanced at the captain. Railgun capacitors at 40%. The captain nodded. Good. The officer looked confused. Good. Yes. The captain stepped toward the tactical display, because that means they took the bait. Several crew members smiled. On the screen, the coalition destroyer fleet pushed aggressively forward, trying to overwhelm the humans before another railgun volley could fire. Exactly what the humans expected. The captain turned to the navigation officer. Vector update. Enemy fleet entering predicted corridor. Distance to kill zone, 20,000 kilometers. The captain gave a quiet nod. Then she tapped her console. Broadcast the signal. Across the human fleet, a short, encrypted message transmitted instantly. The response was immediate. Every human frigate adjusted formation. From the outside, the movement looked subtle, almost insignificant. But on the tactical screens, a perfect geometric pattern formed. The coalition fleet kept advancing. 3,000 warships, command cruisers, plasma carriers, heavy dreadnoughts, a wall of firepower that had crushed civilizations. On the coalition flagship, the Admiral watched the advancing ships with satisfaction. Plasma cannons charging, missile arrays ready, enemy railguns still recharging. He allowed himself a thin smile. They played their trick, but now the illusion ends. The tactical officer suddenly frowned. Admiral, the human ships are changing formation. The display zoomed in. 47 frigates slowly spreading apart. Running away, another officer suggested. The Admiral shook his head. No. He leaned closer. They're spacing themselves. The analyst spoke quietly. Admiral, they're aligning along our advance vector. The Admiral blinked. What? Another alert appeared. Human railgun capacitors at 80%. The Admiral's eyes widened. That's impossible. Capacitors cannot recharge that quickly. But on the battlefield, the truth was visible. Human railguns glowed again, much faster than expected. On the human flagship, the tactical officer smiled. Capacitors fully charged. The captain nodded. Excellent. She gestured at the display. Enemy fleet density, maximum. The coalition destroyers had pushed forward aggressively. Thousands of ships now clustered inside the engagement corridor, exactly where the humans wanted them. The captain folded her arms. Fire pattern? The tactical officer replied calmly. Chain trajectory targeting. Confirmed. The captain gave the order. Second volley. Across 47 frigates, railguns thundered again. But this time, the humans did something different. Instead of firing directly at ships, they fired through them. 47 tungsten slugs launched at terrifying velocity. Each projectile aimed along the exact same narrow corridor. The first coalition destroyer exploded instantly. But the slug didn't stop. It punched through the ship, then struck the cruiser behind it. Then another ship, then another. At relativistic speeds, the projectile barely slowed. On the coalition flagship, officers stared in horror as the tactical screen updated. One projectile, 4 kills. Another projectile, 5 kills. A third, 7 ships destroyed in a straight line. The Admiral shouted, "Break formation." But it was too late. 47 railgun slugs ripped through the tightly packed coalition fleet like cosmic needles. destroyers, cruisers, command ships, even a dreadnought. Dozens of ships torn apart by simple physics. On the display, explosions spread across the Armada. 30 ships, 40, 50, still rising. The Admiral grabbed the edge of his console. This is impossible. The analyst whispered the truth. They predicted our advance. Across the battlefield, fragments of coalition ships drifted through expanding debris clouds. On the human flagship, the tactical officer spoke calmly. Confirmed kills 82. A quiet whistle came from the navigation officer. The captain simply nodded. Enemy reaction? Fleet formation destabilizing. Command signals spiking. Panic increasing. The captain allowed herself a small smile. Good. Then she gave the next order. Prepare maneuver delta. The helmsman nodded. All ships responding. Outside the viewport, 47 human frigates rotated slowly. Not retreating, not advancing, but positioning themselves for something new. Across the coalition fleet, thousands of alien officers stared at the growing wreckage. 82 ships gone, destroyed by weapons they once mocked. And the human fleet had barely begun firing. On the coalition flagship, the admiral whispered quietly, "Who are these humans?" No one answered, because across the battlefield, the railguns were charging again. Point 3. 82 coalition warships drifted as shattered wreckage across the battlefield. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Coalition, an armada that size had suffered catastrophic losses in less than 2 minutes. And the enemy responsible still consisted of only 47 small frigates. On the coalition flagship, alarms pulsed across every console. Tactical officers rushed between stations as damage reports flooded in from surviving ships. Multiple destroyer groups requesting new formation orders. Carrier wing command disrupted. Navigation conflicts across sectors 3 through 7. The admiral stared at the tactical map as red icons blinked everywhere. The human fleet remained calm. 47 ships, drifting almost lazily compared to the frantic movement of the coalition armada. It was unsettling. The admiral slowly spoke. "Why are they not advancing?" The sensor officer checked the data. They remain outside optimal plasma range. So they are cautious. Yes, Admiral. But the Admiral's instincts said something else. This didn't feel cautious. This felt deliberate. Across the battlefield, the human flagship drifted silently through the darkness. Inside the bridge, the captain stood behind the tactical officer as a massive holographic projection of the coalition fleet rotated slowly. Thousands of ships, now slightly scattered. Small pockets of chaos spreading through their formations. Exactly as predicted, the captain crossed her arms. Enemy fleet cohesion dropping steadily. Command signal traffic increasing exponentially. The captain smiled faintly. They're arguing. Several crew members chuckled. The communications officer tilted her head. Typical for coalition fleets. Too many species, too many command protocols. The captain nodded, which means they'll try to reorganize. The tactical officer glanced up. Should we prevent that? The captain answered immediately. Yes. She tapped the console. Open fleet command channel. Across 47 frigates, human captains received the signal. The captain spoke calmly. Phase 2 is complete. She paused briefly. Phase 3 begins now. Around her, the crew moved with quiet confidence. Helm, initiate swarm pattern. Confirmed. Navigation vectors uploaded to all ships. On the battlefield, the human fleet suddenly moved. Not in formation, but in dozens of small, unpredictable arcs. 47 ships splitting into clusters. Some accelerating forward, others drifting sideways. Several rotating in wide curves. To the coalition sensors, it looked chaotic. But it wasn't. It was mathematics. On the alien flagship, the tactical officer frowned. Admiral, the human fleet is scattering. The admiral leaned closer. Running. The officer hesitated. No. The tactical map updated again. Human ships weaving between debris clouds, moving through the broken gaps created by their previous railgun strikes. They're entering the fleet. The Admiral's eyes widened. What? The officer highlighted several vectors. Human frigates were now slipping through the outer layers of coalition ships. Fast, precise, impossible to predict. Another alarm sounded. Human ships entering close engagement range. Range to nearest vessel, 3,000 kilometers. The Admiral barked an order. Destroy them. Plasma cannons roared across the battlefield. Brilliant blue beams filled space as coalition warships fired toward the approaching humans. But the human ships moved differently than expected. Instead of maintaining distance for railgun fire, they dove deeper into the Armada, between ships, through formation gaps. Inside the coalition fleet itself, plasma fire became dangerous. Coalition ships risked hitting their own allies. On the human flagship, the tactical officer smiled. Enemy weapons, hesitation detected. The captain nodded. They can't fire freely anymore. The navigation officer added quietly. Too crowded. Outside, a human frigate slid between two massive coalition cruisers. Its railgun rotated slowly, charging. On the cruiser's bridge, alien officers shouted. Human vessel at close range. Activate point defense. Too late. The railgun fired. At this distance, the projectile crossed the gap in less than a blink. The cruiser's reactor compartment vanished. The ship split in half. The human frigate accelerated away immediately. Across the Armada, similar scenes erupted. Human ships weaving between giants, firing railguns at critical systems, reactors, engines, command decks. One shot, one kill. On the coalition flagship, panic began spreading. Multiple close-range impacts. Destroyers lost in sectors 2 and 4. Human ships inside carrier groups. The Admiral clenched his claws against the console. How are they maneuvering like that? The analyst responded quickly. They anticipated our fleet density. Another officer added. The debris clouds from their previous strikes are interfering with targeting sensors. The Admiral stared at the battlefield. The humans had created chaos deliberately, first destroying ships in straight-line penetrations, then using the debris as cover. Now their frigates moved like predators through the wreckage. And every few seconds, another coalition ship died. On the human flagship, the captain observed calmly. Kill count. Now at 132. The communications officer spoke softly. Coalition command channels are flooding with distress calls. The captain nodded. They expected a shooting gallery. Instead, they got a battlefield they couldn't control. The tactical officer suddenly spoke. Enemy flagship increasing shield output. The captain looked up, trying to stabilize command. Yes. The captain thought for a moment. Then she smiled slightly. Good. She tapped her console again. Transmit phase for instructions. Across the human fleet, new targeting data appeared. Every captain saw the same thing. One massive icon. The coalition flagship. Back on the alien command bridge, the Admiral finally realized something terrifying. The human ships inside the fleet weren't just causing chaos. They were moving in patterns, gradually shifting position, orbiting, closing distance, toward one location, his ship, the flagship. The Admiral whispered slowly, "They're hunting us." At that exact moment, human railguns began charging again. Inside the coalition fleet, at point-blank range, point 4. Inside the coalition armada, panic spread faster than any weapon. Human frigates darted through the dense battlefield like hunters weaving through a herd of giants. Every few seconds, another coalition ship vanished in a sudden burst of ruptured hulls and collapsing reactors. On the coalition flagship, the Admiral gripped the edges of his command console so tightly his claws carved shallow grooves into the metal. Tactical overview. The display expanded across the bridge. Red warning icons multiplied across the entire fleet. Destroyers lost, 93. Cruisers lost, 32. 2 carriers disabled. The Admiral stared in disbelief. That's impossible, our shields. The analyst interrupted quietly. Admiral shields are functioning normally. The Admiral turned slowly. Then why are ships dying? The analyst enlarged a combat replay. A railgun slug struck a coalition cruiser. Instead of exploding against the shield barrier like plasma normally did, the projectile slipped through the shield envelope. Then it punched straight through the hull. The analyst spoke carefully. Our shields disperse energy. Plasma, lasers, antimatter beams, they are all energy-based weapons. He paused. These human projectiles contain almost no energy emission. The Admiral frowned. They are still traveling at extreme velocity. Yes. The analyst zoomed further. The shield registers the projectile too late. The realization hit the bridge like a shockwave. The Admiral whispered, "Our shields were never designed to stop this." Across the battlefield, another coalition destroyer shattered as a tungsten rod ripped through its reactor chamber. Human railguns fired again, and again, and again. The weapons were brutally simple. Mass, velocity, physics. No glowing plasma. No dramatic energy bursts. Just invisible projectiles moving so fast that coalition sensors barely detected them before impact. On the human flagship, the tactical officer tracked the chaos unfolding across the alien fleet. Enemy formations collapsing. Multiple carrier groups requesting retreat vectors. The captain watched the display calmly. Railgun reload. Capacitors fully charged. Good. She glanced at the navigation officer. Fleet positions. All units moving toward designated orbit paths. The captain nodded. Outside the ship, 47 human frigates continued weaving through the coalition fleet. But now their movement had a clear pattern. They were spreading outward, forming a massive circle around one target, the coalition flagship. Back on the alien command bridge, the tactical officer noticed the pattern first. Admiral. The Admiral didn't look away from the display. What? Human ships are repositioning. The officer enlarged the map. Dots representing human vessels slowly forming a ring. The Admiral's breath slowed. Distance. Between 6,000 and 9,000 kilometers. Surrounding us. The Admiral suddenly understood the human strategy. They're isolating the command ship. Another officer shouted, "Admiral, plasma cruisers are requesting permission to engage the surrounding frigates." The Admiral snapped back to command mode. Granted. Destroy them. Across the fleet, massive plasma cannons began firing toward nearby human ships. But the situation had changed. Human frigates were too close. Coalition vessels risked hitting their own allies. Several ships already had. One cruiser's plasma blast missed a human frigate and slammed into a friendly destroyer behind it. The destroyer detonated instantly. The coalition bridge fell silent again. The Admiral slowly whispered, "They planned this." The analyst nodded grimly. "They forced our fleet into dense formation, then entered the formation." The Admiral's eyes flicked across the tactical screen. "And now our own firepower is useless." Another alarm sounded. Human railgun charging signatures detected. Direction. The officer's voice trembled. All directions. Outside the coalition flagship, human frigates rotated slowly. 47 ships, now forming a massive orbital ring around the command vessel. Railguns aligned. Capacitors glowing. On the human flagship, the tactical officer looked toward the captain. Enemy flagship shield strength increasing. "They know what's coming." The captain nodded. "Good." The communications officer suddenly smiled. Coalition internal channels just spiked again. Translation. They're arguing about whether to retreat. The captain allowed herself a small grin. Too late. The helmsman spoke calmly. "All ships in firing position." The tactical officer confirmed. "Railgun capacitors at 100%. The captain stepped forward. Her voice was quiet. "Synchronized targeting." Across 47 human ships, targeting computers locked onto the same point. The coalition flagship. Not the center. Not the hull. A specific internal location. The reactor core. On the alien command bridge, the sensor officer shouted. Massive kinetic signatures detected. Direction. Multiple vectors. The Admiral roared. "Raise shields to maximum." Energy barriers flared brightly around the massive flagship. Layer upon layer of advanced shield technology designed to stop the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. On the human flagship, the tactical officer asked one final question. "Ready to fire?" The captain nodded once. Fire. 47 railguns erupted simultaneously. The projectiles were invisible. No glowing beams. No dramatic energy bursts. Just tungsten rods traveling faster than most missiles. They crossed the distance in less than a second. The coalition flagship shields flickered, tried to react, tried to disperse the impact. But shields weren't built for this. The first projectile punched through, then the second, then the third. Inside the flagship, alarms exploded across every console. Hull breach, structural collapse, reactor containment failure. The admiral watched in horror as the tactical display turned red. The analyst whispered, "The reactor." A final railgun slug punched through the exact location the humans targeted. The flagship's reactor core ruptured. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the largest warship in the coalition fleet tore itself apart. A blinding explosion erupted across space as the reactor detonated. Shock waves of debris rippled through nearby ships. On the human flagship, the tactical officer quietly confirmed, "Enemy flagship destroyed." The captain exhaled slowly. Coalition command structure collapsed. Across the battlefield, thousands of alien ships suddenly found themselves leaderless, confused, panicked, and surrounded by 47 railgun frigates that were already charging another volley. On the human bridge, the captain spoke calmly. Now, she watched the terrified Armada scatter across the tactical display. "Let's finish this." For several seconds after the coalition flagship exploded, the battlefield fell into stunned silence. Thousands of coalition ships drifted in confusion as fragments of their command vessel expanded outward in a massive cloud of burning debris. The explosion had not only destroyed the flagship, it had shattered the command structure of the entire Armada. Across dozens of species and hundreds of fleets, the coalition relied on centralized battle coordination. Without it, their formation began collapsing almost instantly. On the human flagship, the tactical display showed exactly what the captain expected. Clusters of ships breaking formation, multiple fleets issuing conflicting orders, carrier groups trying to retreat, destroyer wings charging blindly forward. The captain folded her arms calmly. Command collapse confirmed. The communications officer nodded. Coalition command network fragmented into 17 independent fleet groups. The navigation officer smirked. "They're arguing again." The captain allowed herself a quiet smile. Predictable. On the screen, the once unified Armada now looked like a chaotic storm of movement. Thousands of ships attempting to decide who was in charge. No one was. And the humans had planned for that. The tactical officer turned to the captain. "Railgun capacitors ready for another volley." The captain nodded. "Hold fire." The officer blinked. "Hold." "Yes." The captain leaned closer to the tactical display. "Because this battle isn't about destroying ships." The navigation officer raised an eyebrow. "Then what's it about?" The captain answered simply, "Teaching a lesson." Across the battlefield, alien fleets scrambled to reorganize. Several commanders attempted to form temporary command groups. Others broadcast emergency retreat orders. But the chaos only worsened, because every fleet had different protocols, different languages, different priorities. On one coalition cruiser, a reptilian commander shouted at his bridge crew, "Regroup the destroyer wings." Another officer shouted back, "The carriers are retreating." "Then stop them. They won't respond to our authority." The commander slammed his claws against the console. "This is madness." And that madness spread across the entire Armada. Meanwhile, the human ships remained perfectly calm. 47 frigates drifting slowly around the battlefield, watching, waiting. On the human flagship, the communications officer suddenly spoke. "We're receiving open transmissions from coalition vessels." The captain looked up, put one through. A new face appeared on the projection screen. A tall alien with pale gray skin and glowing amber eyes. A fleet commander from one of the coalition strike groups. His expression was tense. "You destroyed our flagship." The human captain nodded. "Yes, you have crippled our fleet." "That appears to be correct." The alien commander stared at her. "You could finish us right now." The captain didn't answer immediately. Instead, she tapped a console. The tactical display appeared on the transmission, showing the entire battlefield. Thousands of coalition ships, surrounded, outmaneuvered, and fully within range of human railguns. The alien commander slowly understood. "You're not firing." "No." "Why?" The captain's voice remained calm. "Because you need to understand something." The alien leaned closer to the screen. "What?" The captain gestured toward the floating human frigates visible on the display. "You called our ships obsolete." The alien said nothing. "You mocked our railguns." Still silence. "You believed advanced technology automatically meant superiority." The captain's eyes hardened slightly. "But you forgot something important." The alien commander asked quietly. "What?" The captain answered with a faint smile. "Humans don't build weapons to impress people." She tapped the tactical screen. "We build them to win." Across the human fleet, railgun capacitors hummed quietly as they recharged. The alien commander glanced at the display. "Your ships are centuries behind ours." "Yes." "Your weapons are primitive." "Also yes." "Then how are you doing this?" The captain leaned slightly closer to the camera. "Because you built your fleet around shields." She tapped another command. Combat analysis appeared on the screen. Every railgun impact mapped across coalition ships. "Your shields stop energy." Another image appeared. A railgun projectile piercing straight through a shield envelope. But they barely react to mass moving at relativistic speed. The alien's expression shifted. Realization spreading slowly. "You never tried to match our technology." "No." "You studied it." "Yes." "You designed your weapons specifically to counter it." The captain nodded. "For 73 years." The alien stared in disbelief. 73. Since the first time the coalition fleet entered human space. The captain paused briefly. "We knew we couldn't outgun you, so we didn't try." Another tactical overlay appeared, showing predicted coalition formations, fleet density patterns, shield response timings, railgun trajectory models. The alien whispered, "You planned this battle." The captain's voice remained steady. For decades, silence filled the transmission. Across the battlefield, coalition ships drifted uneasily. Thousands of alien crews watching human frigates that looked almost laughably simple. Yet those same ships had destroyed more than 200 warships in minutes. The alien commander finally spoke again. "What happens now?" The captain looked out at the battlefield through the forward viewport. Wreckage floating everywhere. Fragments of what used to be the most powerful armada in the galaxy. Then she answered calmly. "Now," her tactical officer interrupted softly. "Railguns fully charged." The captain nodded slowly. Then she returned her gaze to the alien commander. "Now you decide whether the lesson continues." The alien commander swallowed. Behind him, dozens of coalition officers waited for his answer. Across the battlefield, 47 railguns aimed silently at the surviving armada. For several long seconds, the alien commander said nothing. Behind him, the chaotic bridge of his cruiser flickered with warning lights as reports poured in from across the broken coalition fleet. Destroyed ships, disabled carriers, scattered formations, and surrounding them all 47 quiet human frigates. The commander finally spoke, his voice lower now. "You are threatening the entire armada." The human captain tilted her head slightly. "No." A brief pause. "We're demonstrating." Across the battlefield, coalition ships drifted uneasily as their sensors tracked the human vessels circling the fleet. The alien commander looked down at the tactical display again. 234 destroyed ships. Dozens more crippled, all from weapons they once mocked. He asked quietly, "How many more railgun volleys can you fire?" The human captain didn't hesitate. "As many as necessary." The alien commander's shoulders tightened. "You cannot destroy us all." "No," the captain agreed calmly. "But we don't need to." She tapped a console, and a new overlay appeared across the transmission. Predictive casualty models. If the humans continued firing, the alien commander's eyes widened slightly. Another 1,000 ships destroyed within minutes. Possibly more if the Armada remained clustered. The captain watched him carefully. "You see the problem." Behind the alien commander, one of his officers whispered something urgently. The commander listened, then looked back at the screen. "Our fleets are trying to retreat." The captain nodded. "Yes, you are preventing it." The captain didn't deny it, because the tactical display clearly showed human frigates blocking every escape vector. 47 ships placed at mathematically perfect positions. Any large fleet movement would expose ships to railgun corridors. The alien commander slowly understood. "You trapped us." "Yes, but you're not attacking." "Correct." "Why?" The captain leaned slightly closer to the camera. "Because this is the part where you learn." Across the human flagship bridge, several officers smiled faintly. They had seen this moment coming. The moment the coalition realized what kind of enemy they had just encountered. The alien commander glanced again at the debris fields surrounding the fleet. Shattered cruisers, broken destroyers, pieces of the once mighty flagship. "You could have destroyed us from the start." "No, you waited." "Yes." The captain folded her hands behind her back. "Because fear spreads faster than explosions." The alien commander didn't respond. But behind him, the atmosphere on his bridge had changed. Officers who once looked confident now stared nervously at the human ships. Even the tactical projections seemed different now. Those small frigates no longer looked primitive. They looked dangerous. On the human flagship, the communications officer spoke softly. "Coalition channels are flooding with panic signals." The captain nodded. "Good." The tactical officer added. "Several fleets are requesting permission to retreat from their sector governments." The captain's eyes flicked across the display. They won't get answers. Because their leadership had died with the flagship. Across the coalition armada, confusion deepened. Destroyer wings drifted without orders. Carrier groups attempted to reorganize fighter screens. Several ships began accelerating away from the battlefield. Then, alarms triggered. Human railgun targeting systems locked onto them. The ships immediately slowed again. Back on the alien commander's bridge, the officer who had spoken earlier whispered urgently. "They're controlling the entire battlefield." The commander nodded slowly. "Yes." He looked at the human captain again. "You wanted us to understand something." "Yes." The captain stepped slightly to the side, so the viewport behind her became visible. Through it, the battlefield stretched endlessly. Human frigates drifting calmly among the wreckage. Alien warships frozen in uncertainty. "This," she said quietly, "is what happens when you underestimate humanity." The alien commander asked carefully, "You're trying to send a message?" The captain smiled faintly. "Exactly." "What message?" Before she answered, the tactical officer spoke again. "Enemy ships forming emergency command groups." The captain glanced at the screen. "Too slow." Another officer spoke. "Several fleets are preparing a coordinated attack." The captain raised an eyebrow. "Oh." The tactical officer zoomed in on the display. 3 coalition fleet groups were attempting to form a spearhead formation. Hundreds of ships aligning weapons, trying to punch a hole through the human blockade. On the alien commander's bridge, the same data appeared. One officer shouted, "They think they can overwhelm the humans." The commander whispered, "They still don't understand." Across the battlefield, 300 coalition ships surged forward together. Plasma cannons charging, missile racks opening. A wall of firepower aimed directly at a small cluster of human frigates. On the human flagship, the tactical officer watched calmly. Enemy attack formation confirmed. The captain nodded. "Let them try." The helmsman spoke quietly. "Those ships are entering rail corridor beta." The captain smiled slightly. "Exactly where we want them." Across space, The coalition attack fleet accelerated. Hundreds of ships charging toward the human line. They fired. Thousands of plasma blasts streaked across the void. Missiles followed. A storm of firepower capable of erasing entire fleets. Then the human ships moved. 5 frigates drifted aside, opening a narrow corridor. The coalition fleet surged through the gap, directly into it. On the human flagship, the tactical officer confirmed calmly. Rail corridor beta fully populated. The captain gave the order. Fire. Across the battlefield, 47 railguns fired again. The tungsten slugs screamed through space at relativistic speed, straight through the attack fleet. 1 projectile. 4 ships destroyed. Another. 5 more. Another. 6. Within seconds, the spearhead formation collapsed into burning debris. The surviving coalition ships scattered in terror. Back on the alien commander's bridge, every officer stared at the tactical display. The commander closed his eyes briefly, then whispered the truth. We're not fighting a fleet. He opened his eyes again. We're fighting a trap. Across the battlefield, human railguns began charging again. The battlefield had become a cage. What once looked like open space now revealed invisible lines of death stretching across the coalition armada. Debris from destroyed ships floated like ghostly markers, outlining corridors the human fleet had already calculated long before the first railgun fired. On the human flagship, the tactical map displayed the entire battlefield like a solved equation. Every coalition fleet movement, every debris cloud, every possible escape vector. The captain stood quietly, watching the chaos unfold exactly as predicted. Status report. The tactical officer spoke calmly. Coalition spearhead formation eliminated. Confirmed destroyed ships, 116. Additional vessels disabled, 32. The captain nodded slowly. Total losses? 374 coalition ships destroyed. A low whistle came from the navigation station, and they had barely used half their ammunition. Across the battlefield, the coalition fleet had stopped advancing entirely. Thousands of alien ships now drifted uncertainly among expanding clouds of wreckage. Fear had replaced confidence. On the coalition cruiser, where the surviving commander still watched the battle, the bridge had fallen silent. No one spoke. No one shouted orders anymore. They simply stared at the tactical display. 374 ships gone, destroyed by weapons that didn't even glow. Finally, one officer whispered, "They're controlling everything." The commander nodded slowly. "Yes." Another officer spoke quietly. "Our ships cannot maneuver without entering their firing corridors." He pointed to the map. Human ships had positioned themselves so precisely that every large movement created a predictable line of fire. The Armada was trapped inside a mathematical prison. Back on the human flagship, the communications officer spoke again. "Coalition transmissions are changing." The captain glanced over. "How so?" "Less panic, more silence." The captain smiled slightly. "They're thinking now." The navigation officer added, "They're trying to find a way out." The captain stepped closer to the tactical display. "There isn't one." The tactical officer looked at her. "Should we demonstrate that?" The captain considered the battlefield. Thousands of alien ships waiting, watching, trying to understand what kind of enemy they had encountered. Then she nodded. "Yes." She tapped a command into her console. Across the human fleet, the message appeared instantly. Phase 7 initiated. 47 frigates began moving again. But this time their motion was slow, deliberate. They weren't weaving through the fleet anymore. They were spreading out, farther apart, forming a massive spherical perimeter around the coalition armada. On the alien commander's bridge, sensors immediately detected the movement. Human ships repositioning. The commander leaned forward. "What pattern?" The tactical officer enlarged the display. Dots representing human ships slowly expanding outward. The realization came quickly. They're building a containment sphere. The commander's voice dropped. "They're sealing the battlefield." Another officer whispered, "That means we can't escape." Across the Coalition fleet, the same conclusion spread rapidly. Human ships were now positioned so that any retreat direction led directly into a railgun firing corridor. Every vector covered, every path predicted. Back on the human flagship, the captain watched the containment sphere form perfectly. Perimeter coverage complete. Railguns charged and ready. The captain nodded. Good. The communications officer suddenly spoke. We're receiving a wideband coalition transmission. From who? Multiple fleet commanders. The captain gestured. Put it through. The main screen filled with several alien faces. Commanders from different species, different fleets, but now united by the same expression. Concern. One of them spoke first. You have surrounded our entire armada. Yes. Another commander leaned forward. You cannot destroy all of us. The captain didn't argue. That's correct. The alien's eyes narrowed. Then what are you doing? The captain stepped slightly closer to the camera, showing you the end of this battle. Another commander asked carefully, You are forcing our surrender. No. The captain shook her head slowly. Humans don't force surrender. The alien frowned. Then what do you want? The captain looked out at the silent battlefield through the viewport. Thousands of ships waiting in uncertainty. Then she answered quietly, We want you to understand. The commanders exchanged confused looks. Understand what? The captain pointed toward the human frigates visible on the tactical display. You thought we were technologically inferior. No one spoke. You thought we were primitive. Still silence. You thought railguns were obsolete. The captain's voice hardened slightly. But what you failed to understand is that humans fight differently. One alien commander whispered. How? The captain smiled faintly. We fight smarter. Behind her, the tactical officer suddenly spoke. Captain, what is it? Coalition flagship debris field showing unusual activity. The captain turned. Zoom in. The display enlarged. The destroyed flagship had left a massive, expanding debris cloud. But something inside it was moving. Large pieces of wreckage shifting. The navigation officer frowned. Multiple engines activating. The captain's eyes narrowed. New ship. The tactical officer scanned deeper. Then his expression changed. Captain, what? That's not a new ship. The screen highlighted the object. A massive shape emerging slowly from the wreckage cloud. Bigger than anything else in the fleet. A hidden vessel. An emergency command dreadnought. And its weapons were already charging. Across the Coalition fleet, shocked officers watched the same thing. A secret warship rising from the ashes of the flagship. The alien commander whispered. The Emperor's dreadnought. On the human flagship, the captain stared at the massive warship coming online. Then she smiled. Well. She folded her arms calmly. Now the real fight begins. Behind her, 47 railguns started charging again, at first. The massive shape rising from the wreckage looked like nothing more than drifting debris. A shadow among the shattered fragments of the Coalition flagship. Then engines ignited. For colossal drives flared to life, pushing aside clouds of broken metal and frozen atmosphere, as the hidden warship emerged from the debris field like a waking titan. Across the battlefield, sensors screamed. On the human flagship, the tactical display rapidly recalculated. The captain watched in silence as the enormous vessel came fully into view. It was unlike anything the Coalition had deployed so far. Nearly 4 kilometers long. Layered armor plates thicker than entire human frigates. Weapon arrays stacked along its spine like a city of cannons. The tactical officer's voice lowered slightly. Unknown vessel class detected. The navigation officer scanned deeper. Then his eyes widened. Captain, power output is enormous. The communications officer suddenly spoke. Coalition channels just exploded with traffic. The captain glanced over. What are they saying? The officer read the translation slowly. They're calling it the Emperor's Dreadnought. On the Coalition cruiser, where the surviving commander watched the battlefield, the bridge erupted with shock voices. It's real. I thought it was just a legend. The commander leaned closer to the display. The massive warship continued pushing through the flagship wreckage, its armor scarred but intact. It was hidden inside the flagship's armored core. Another officer whispered. The Emperor kept a second command ship, a warship designed for the worst possible scenario. And now it was awake, across the human fleet. Sensors locked onto the dreadnought instantly. On the human flagship, the tactical officer spoke carefully. Multiple spinal plasma cannons charging. Shield output increasing. Point defense systems active. The captain nodded slowly. So that's their final card. Outside the viewport, the dreadnought rotated slowly, its massive weapon systems aligning with the surrounding human frigates. Then a new transmission appeared. The communications officer looked up. Captain, incoming signal. From the dreadnought. The captain nodded. Put it through. The main screen flickered. A new alien appeared. Tall, silver-scaled, eyes glowing like burning metal. Unlike the previous commanders, this one carried absolute authority. The bridge of the dreadnought behind him looked massive. Dozens of officers stood silent in the background. The alien spoke with cold confidence. I am High Sovereign Kael'voreth, Supreme Commander of the Imperial Coalition. The human captain nodded politely. Captain Mara Ellison, Human Defense Fleet. The Sovereign studied her carefully. You destroyed my flagship. Yes. You crippled my armada. That appears accurate. His eyes narrowed slightly. With obsolete weapons. The captain smiled faintly. Those obsolete weapons seemed to be working. Several human officers quietly suppressed smiles. The Sovereign leaned forward slightly. You believe this battle is already won? The captain shrugged. You're surrounded. The Sovereign tapped a command. A tactical display appeared behind him, but this one focused entirely on his dreadnought. Armor thickness, shield layers, weapon arrays. This vessel was built specifically to counter primitive kinetic weapons. The human tactical officer whispered quietly. That's interesting. The Sovereign continued. Your railguns destroyed my fleet because my commanders underestimated you. His voice hardened. I will not make that mistake. Behind him, the dreadnought's spinal cannons finished charging. Energy readings spiked across every sensor. On the human flagship, alarms began chiming. Massive plasma discharge imminent. The captain watched the display carefully. How many cannons? The tactical officer scanned again. 12 primary plasma lances. The captain nodded. Target. The officer's voice tightened slightly. All human ships. The Sovereign spoke again. You trapped my fleet. He smiled slightly. But now you are the ones inside the kill zone. The dreadnought fired. 12 massive plasma lances erupted into space. Each beam brighter than a star. Each capable of erasing entire warships. Across the battlefield, the beams swept toward the surrounding human frigates. On the human flagship, the navigation officer shouted. Evasive maneuvers. Human ships scattered instantly. Several frigates barely avoided the plasma beams as they carved through space. But one ship wasn't fast enough. A human frigate was caught directly in the path of a plasma lance. The beam struck the ship. For a moment, the frigate disappeared inside the burning light. Then, the beam passed. The ship remained, damaged, scarred, but still alive. On the Coalition dreadnought, several officers blinked in disbelief. The Sovereign leaned forward. How? On the human flagship, the tactical officer smiled slightly. Thermal armor plating held. The captain nodded calmly. Human ships don't rely entirely on shields. The dreadnought began charging again. But this time something else happened. Across the battlefield, human frigates stopped drifting. They began moving. All of them. 47 ships accelerating simultaneously toward the dreadnought. On the human bridge, the navigation officer grinned. All ships entering attack vector. The tactical officer added. Railgun capacitors charging. The captain watched the massive warship slowly rotating to face them. Then she said quietly, he thinks his ship can stop us. The tactical officer looked up. Can it? The captain smiled. We're about to find out. Across space, 47 human frigates surged forward. railguns glowing brighter with every passing second. The dreadnought's cannons began charging again. Two unstoppable forces accelerating toward each other. On the Coalition Dreadnought Bridge, the Sovereign spoke coldly. Let them come. Behind him, the largest warship in the Coalition fleet prepared to fire again. But on the human flagship, the tactical officer suddenly spoke. Captain, what is it? Targeting solutions complete. The captain nodded slowly. Good. She looked directly at the approaching dreadnought on the tactical display, then gave a single command. Prepare the final volley. Outside the ship, 47 railguns locked onto the same target. The Emperor's dreadnought loomed across the battlefield like a moving fortress. 4 kilometers of layered armor, 12 spinal plasma lances, shield generators powerful enough to stop most weapons in the galaxy. And at its center stood High Sovereign Kael Vorith, watching the human fleet charge directly toward him. On the dreadnought's bridge, officers moved quickly around him as targeting data streamed across massive tactical displays. Human vessels accelerating. Distance closing rapidly. Railgun capacitors detected. The Sovereign folded his hands behind his back. They believe numbers will overcome armor. An officer spoke carefully. Our shields are calibrated for kinetic dispersal, Sovereign. Good. Outside the dreadnought, its massive hull slowly rotated to face the incoming human formation. The plasma lances glowed again as energy built inside the colossal weapon chambers. Across the battlefield, human frigates surged forward in perfect formation. 47 ships moving like a single organism. On the human flagship, Captain Mara Ellison stood calmly at the center of the bridge. The tactical officer tracked the approaching dreadnought. Range, 15,000 kilometers. Enemy plasma cannons charging. Shield strength increasing. The navigation officer spoke quietly. That ship is heavily armored. The captain nodded. Yes. Another officer added. Our railguns may not penetrate the core. The captain glanced at the tactical display. Good thing we're not aiming for the core. The officer blinked. What? But before she explained, the tactical officer spoke again. Enemy plasma firing solution complete. The captain exhaled slowly. Then we'd better be faster. She tapped her console. Fleet synchronization. Across 47 human ships, targeting computers aligned perfectly. But something about the firing pattern was different. Every railgun was aimed at a slightly different point on the dreadnought. Not random, precise, mathematical. On the Coalition Dreadnought Bridge, the Sovereign watched the incoming ships carefully. They are not spreading out. No, Sovereign. They are maintaining attack formation. The Sovereign smiled coldly. Then this will end quickly. He raised one claw. Fire. The dreadnought unleashed its full power. 12 plasma lances erupted across space. This time the beams were focused, concentrated. A wall of starfire racing toward the human fleet. On the human flagship, alarms echoed across the bridge. Incoming plasma. Impact in 3 seconds. The captain spoke calmly. Execute Maneuver Gamma. Across the fleet, 47 human ships suddenly shifted position. Not scattering, rotating. Each frigate sliding slightly sideways in a synchronized maneuver. The plasma lances tore through space between them. Several beams passed so close the hull plating glowed white-hot. But none struck directly. The navigation officer exhaled slowly. Clear. The captain didn't celebrate. She simply spoke. Now. The tactical officer nodded. Railguns ready. Outside the ship, 47 railguns fired at once. But this time the slugs were not aimed at the same location. Each projectile struck a different point along the dreadnought's hull. Armor plates, weapon mounts, shield projectors, sensor towers. The impacts were small, tiny flashes across the enormous warship. On the dreadnought bridge, officers frowned. Minimal penetration. Outer armor damage only. The Sovereign watched calmly. They cannot breach our hull. Then the second volley fired. 47 more tungsten slugs struck the same points. Again and again, the human ships didn't move. They simply kept firing. Perfect rhythm. Volley after volley. The tactical officer on the dreadnought suddenly shouted. Localized armor stress increasing. The Sovereign frowned. What? The display zoomed in. Small craters forming across the dreadnought's hull. Not deep, but growing. Every new railgun strike hitting the exact same locations. The Sovereign's eyes narrowed. They are weakening the armor. Another officer whispered. Structural resonance building. Then the third volley hit. 47 impacts. The weakened armor plates finally cracked. Fragments of hull plating broke loose and drifted away. Now the railgun slugs began punching deeper. On the human flagship, the tactical officer spoke calmly. Armor breach confirmed. The captain nodded. Continue firing. Across the fleet, railguns roared again. This time the tungsten slugs punched directly into exposed systems. Shield emitters, cooling conduits, weapon power lines. Inside the dreadnought, alarms exploded across the bridge. Shield generator failure. Plasma cannon 3 offline. Internal hull breaches detected. The Sovereign gripped the console. They are dismantling the ship. Another railgun volley struck. This time one projectile punched through a damaged armor section and into the dreadnought's central reactor chamber. On the human flagship, the tactical officer whispered. Reactor exposure detected. The captain spoke one final command. Full fleet final volley. 47 railguns fired simultaneously. 47 tungsten slugs raced toward the exposed reactor core. On the dreadnought bridge, the Sovereign watched the incoming impacts. For the first time since the battle began, his confidence vanished. Brace for. The reactor detonated. A blinding explosion erupted from the center of the dreadnought. The massive warship split apart as internal energy ripped through its structure. Shock waves of debris blasted outward across the battlefield. When the light faded, the Emperor's dreadnought was gone. Across the Coalition fleet, stunned silence filled every bridge. Their final warship, destroyed by 47 frigates. On the human flagship, the tactical officer confirmed quietly. Enemy dreadnought eliminated. The captain looked across the battlefield. Thousands of alien ships drifting in quiet shock. No weapons firing. No engines moving. Just silence. The communications officer spoke softly. Coalition fleets are transmitting surrender signals. The captain nodded slowly. Accepted. She stepped closer to the broadcast console. Open wideband transmission. Across the entire battlefield, every surviving Coalition ship received the signal. The captain's voice echoed across space. This is Captain Mara Ellison of the Human Defense Fleet. She paused briefly. You came to conquer humanity. The camera behind her showed the 47 human frigates drifting calmly among the wreckage. You believed our technology was primitive. Her voice remained calm. You believed railguns were obsolete. She leaned slightly closer to the camera. You were wrong. Across thousands of alien ships, stunned crews listened. The captain continued. Humanity does not build weapons to look impressive. We build them to win. She gestured toward the battlefield. This is the result. A long pause followed. Then she finished. Leave human space. Or next time. Her eyes hardened slightly. There will be more than 47 ships waiting for you. The transmission ended. Across the battlefield, Coalition ships slowly began turning away, retreating, carrying the same message back to the rest of the galaxy, that humanity's obsolete railgun frigates had just destroyed the most powerful armada ever assembled. And the story of that battle would spread everywhere, long after the wreckage was gone. A warning whispered across stars. Never underestimate humans, and never laugh at the weapons they choose to keep. If you enjoyed this story from HFY Global Tales, make sure to like the video, share it with fellow sci-fi fans, and tell us in the comments what humanity should build next. Because out there in the galaxy,